Welcome to week 3 of our Miracle series. I'm so glad that you have come back and joined us this week. And we're going to be discussing miracles on the campus. And we're going to see how God reveals His purpose for our lives and His mercy in our lives. So I'm really excited about it. But we're going to start by talking about the American dream. You know, the American dream has probably changed through the years and means different things to different people. So I want you to take just a minute in your group and talk about what is the American dream to you. All right, up next, we're going to take a minute to read 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 1 through 6. And after you get done with that, I wanted you to take a minute and just see what verses 5 and 6 tell you about your purpose.
This is what Paul said to them. He's defending them. And so this church is now, the church is birthed and people are growing and asking questions. And there's people trying to bring some disunity into the church. And Paul is defending his purpose. And here's the first point I want to make, the miracle of purpose. Paul had a miraculous purpose. And Mid-Cities has a miraculous purpose. You and I have been assigned by God to reach the next generation. If you wonder if Mid-Cities is a church for the next generation, just look at these videos, read the stories, listen, ask someone, hey, is God doing something in students' lives? Yes, He is. He has been, and He will continue to move in the next generation. God has called us as a church to reach the next generation. This is not a purpose that you and I are dreaming up. We didn't sit down and say, hey, what's a cool purpose? God birthed this purpose. God assigned this purpose to us as a people. And see, there's called general purpose, and then there's specific purpose, right? So many of us understand the idea of all of us have a general purpose. We've got to live, we've got to pay rent, we've got to pay mortgages, we've got to actually become a part of a functioning society, we've got to be nice to people. Sometimes it's hard, right? But we all have a general purpose, and then spiritually there's even some general purpose. There's people that serves and ushers, that's a general purpose. But then God does this miracle where He comes and He speaks to people and He gives them a divine assignment, a specific purpose. And He came to Paul and He said, Paul, I need you to go to the Gentiles and proclaim the gospel to them. Paul was a Jew of Jews. He was not a Gentile. He had more in common with Jews than Gentiles. But God gave him this miraculous purpose to bring the gospel, to steward the gospel, to carefully bring the gospel to the Gentile. I want to propose to you this morning that God has called Mid-Cities to carefully, without losing hope or focus, steward the gospel for the next generation. As a church, we need to carry the glory of Jesus and the message of Christ and let the next generation know, hey, do you know about Jesus?
It's really powerful to see how God revealed His purpose to Paul. And you know what's awesome is that God has a purpose for you and for me. And so we want to take a few minutes to dive into that and see what God's purpose is for us. So you've got a couple questions to answer and discuss as a group. What has God called you to? And let this be personal. Let this be real specific to you. You can even talk about what has God called your family to. But then also, how are you answering God's call right now? Take a few minutes and discuss that.
And the second point I want to point out here is the miracle of mercy. The miracle of mercy. It's impossible to walk in a miraculous purpose without miraculous mercy. And what is mercy? Mercy is when God does something for us that we didn't ask for, dreamed of, or deserve. It's a gift that He gives us that completely nullifies what we've done that would disqualify us. Some of us feel, man, I don't have much to say. Man, I've done too much. And we so quickly forgive the importance, the imminence of the mercy of God. And see, Paul said, we have this ministry, we have this miraculous purpose by the mercy of God. It's by God's mercy that we receive our purpose. And in fact, it's mercy that allows us and opens the eyes of our hearts to realize the gift that God's given us and the gift of purpose. Now, what is the mercy of God? And I want to focus and zoom in for a moment on the gospel. The mercy of God in light in the sense of the gospel, because God's mercy is not something that's esoteric. It's not something that we just theorize over. It's something practical. The gospel is not just, oh, God loves us and it's this mystical force. The gospel is God loved us so much that He came to us to prove to us who He is, and not just to prove to you and I in this room, but to prove to every person that breathes and walks on this earth that He is God and that He is love and that He wants to extend His mercy to their life. You will not believe how many times I have a conversation with a young person on a college campus that will look at me and say, I have never heard this. If I could get paid every time I have heard a person, a young person, look at me in the eyes, whether they're from Texas, whether they're from North America or from another nation, they will look at me and I explain the miracle of God's mercy and what God did for us, and they'll look at me with sincerity and say, Ernie, I have never heard this. And I'm sitting there thinking, has no one ever valued you enough to just let you know that God's mercy is free for you? How busy and distracted are we, and how unbelievably blinded are we as the church? I'm not saying Mid-Cities, we're perfect, other churches, to not bring the mercy of God to the next generation and at least let them know, hey, God did something for you. And you know, it's met with, are you sure I can be forgiven?
The good news of Jesus Christ and the mercy that God has poured out on us is so powerful and changes lives, just as Ernie talked about. So let's take a minute to discuss, how has the good news of Jesus Christ changed your life? And how does God's mercy give you purpose?
Mid-Cities, as a church, as a people, we are called by God collectively to value the campus, to care for the college student. These are the future leaders of society. The last point I want to talk about is the miracle of the campus. Why is this such a big focus for us at Mid-Cities? Well, in 1994, there's something called the miracle. Something happened that was called the miracle in Manila. March 4th, 1994. Pastor Rice Brooks, Pastor Phil Manasso, Pastor Steve Murrell. Pastor Steve at this time, they all three met at Mississippi State University, became friends, were in a college ministry together, and the mercy of God was unveiled to them. And they started asking God, what is their purpose? What's God's purpose for their life? And so fast forward a couple of years later, Pastor Steve now is pastoring a fast-growing church in Manila in the Philippines. Pastor Rice and Phil Manasseh is on their way to Singapore to go and do some new outreaches and plant new churches. And they stop over in Manila with their old college roommate and friend, Steve Murrell, that was in the same ministry. And they start talking about all the open doors and opportunity and the purpose of God that they see through the mercy of God in Singapore and all over Asia. And Pastor Steve Murrell is amazed at all this, and he's telling them what's happening with him in Manila and how God's moving, and hundreds and thousands of young college students are coming to know the Lord, and then they graduate and they start businesses and they build families God's way. And they just all amazed. And in this moment, the Lord speaks to all three of them at the same time, which that doesn't happen very often. When's the last time you and your wife at the same time heard the voice of God? The three of them refer to this as the miracle in Manila. And in this moment, they felt, and they described this as a moment where God said, I've called you to reach every student on every campus in every nation. I called you to reach you've got these three American men with their wives and kids and families dispersed. Some live in California. Pastor Steve Murrell and his wife live in the Philippines, in Manila. And now they come together a couple years after starting just an outreach by faith They saw a miracle because the miraculous purpose of God was now at work, and they could not deny the grace of God on their life because they have seen collectively hundreds, if not a few thousand students already give their life to the Lord. They saw revival on the college campus. But you know what happens to a college student? They graduate and they get a job. Some of them start companies, some of them start families, and they start building society. And these men are sitting in this moment and they realize, well, God has called us to bring the gospel to every student on every campus in every nation. And then they come up with this dream and they birth this ministry called Every Nation, which Mid-Cities is a part of this family of churches, which today, my friends, are in 81 countries. Over 1,400 college ministries and churches. In 81 countries. This started in 1994 when 3 friends, through the mercy of God, saw the purpose of God. And you know what makes this happen in 30 short years? Only God. See, Mid-Cities is not called to reach students because we are looking for something good to do with our time, and you faithfully give your resources and you faithfully want to serve and you want to help to make this happen. That's not why. We are called by God. There's a grace on our church to reach the students, to shape the next generation. College students, if you are here, imagine your life 10 years from now. Maybe you have a baby on one hip and one in the stroller or the wagon behind you. Your husband's working a job. Your husband's got an influential job and is maybe a young executive and is sitting in meetings where they employ 1,000 people. And they're part of a company that has lots of employees, and they get to decide how to guide and navigate and build the people in their company's lives and influence them. And through your leadership and your family and your life, 1,000 employees comes to know the Lord Jesus. And it shapes another 1,000 families. And through them, more families are shaped. And a part of those thousands of families that's now being affected over a sequence of years. Many of them move back to foreign countries that they came from. And then they bring the gospel to their community and families. And they bring Jesus with them and the miracle of the mercy of God and make it known. And all of a sudden you have these pockets all over the world and all over North America where the gospel is just growing and increasing. This is the miracle of the campus. God's literally, you saw in this video, God is gathering the nations and students from out of state and local students right here in the Permian Basin. If we want to go to the world, all we have to do is go to the campus. God's already brought the world to us, and we get to help love and shape the next generation. And we're not asking you as Mid-Cities to everyone quit your job and become a missionary. Now, if you want to do that, that's okay. Talk to me afterwards. But we are asking you to care. We want to ask every one of us to pray and believe that we'll continue to see a miracle on our campuses here.
I love hearing the story of how God revealed His purpose to these men that founded the global family of churches that we now call Every Nation and are so glad to be a part of. But I'm struck by how clear the call was, how clearly they understood God's call to reach campuses and reach students in order to reach every nation. And I'm curious, have you ever had a moment with the Lord where you understood His call that clearly? If so, would you tell the group about that? And then as we begin to shift our focus to how we can reach the campus and reach the next generation, I just want to ask, how can you be a part of reaching the next generation? Take a few minutes and discuss those two things. As a part of Every Nation, we believe that the best way to reach the world is to reach the campus. And Ernie went on to give us some ways that we can be involved in reaching Every Nation through the campus. And so I want to take a minute and just give you an opportunity to respond to that. In fact, if you will text ENC to the number 432-203-0556, there'll be a little form that comes up and it allows you to commit to praying for or helping with ENC in one of 4 ways. Those 4 ways are: 1, to pray. to committing to pray to see God reaching students through our Every Nation campus ministry. 2 is to give, helping students go to conferences or retreats, things like that. Sometimes these students can't afford those things, and so sowing into that and helping them go and be in a place where they can experience God and be changed by Him. The 3rd one is to serve. Every Nation, our ENC meets on Monday nights, and if you are interested, you feel maybe God is pulling you to serve in that way, you can do that. And then finally, there may be someone out there, someone in your group that is feeling a strong pull of the Lord to become a missionary. If that is you, you can also do that on that form. But go ahead and text ENC to that number so that you can commit to be involved in reaching the campus in some way. Every single one of those matters and is important. And then as we close, we're just going to take some time to pray. And we want to pray and do a couple of things. One, that God will help us fulfill His purpose for each of us in reaching the nations. And then 2, that God will help us to reach the next generation with the good news of Jesus Christ. So take a few minutes and just pray together as a group.